Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here. Sorry about the few technical issues. It's probably not the first one today, but yeah, really happy to be here. The conference today has been loads of great chats so far, and I really feel there's a really massive community that's all doing their bits to actually move on in the world of employer branding. And I'm here today along with Rowan and Connor to do the same as well. Before we start the intros, though, just a bit about myself. I'm Chris LeCand Harwood. I've been in employer, consumer, and education marketing now for 20 years. And about nearly 2 years ago, I set up my own little company called the Content Marketing Pod. So that's the reason I was contacted to come along, because actually I've also got a podcast as well, which I'll tell you a bit about, where we talk about content marketing in the world of employer marketing, employer branding, etc. So this stat of 85% was one of the big reasons why I wanted to set up the Content Marketing Pod, but in particular to set up the Employer Content Marketing Pod. When 85% of people, of employers, are disengaged at work, that's a massive deal for businesses, and I think it's ultimately the number one challenge facing employers this decade is finding the right people. And when there's $7 trillion lost productivity because of that 85%, there's some big issues that need to be addressed. So there's definitely, I feel that content marketing has a role to play in that, because ultimately, if we can give content to the people we want to hire, the right people we want to hire, then the more chance we'll earn their attention and convert them into candidates and the right hire in the end of the day. So I launched the Employer Content Marketing Pod in February 2020, just before the pandemic properly kicked in. I'm now 38 episodes in, and lucky to have had 25,000 plus streams. And for today, we've got episode 39 set up specifically for the conference today. So what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about how employer content marketing can help transform employer branding successfully. And I've got Rowan and Connor here today with me to help me share that with you. So first of all, let's introduce Rowan. He should be with us shortly.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I think I'm in now. Beauty of doing this live and online. So my name's Rowan Marriott. I'm the head of resourcing at a company called Signet Healthcare. So we're a huge mental health and social care company in the UK. And my job is basically to recruit people in skill shortage areas. So it's quite a challenge. That's me.
And Connor, bring you into the session as well. Bear with me, people. I'm just trying to get Connor added.
Hi, I'm
Connor, how are you?
Cotton. Yeah, good. I'm Connor Cotton. I'm the managing director at a company called Not Going to Uni, working in the early careers space to support students when they leave school and college, finding their alternatives to university and apprenticeships and other alternatives that are on offer.
Good man. Thank you very much. Right. So what we'll do is just run through what we're going to be covering off today. So first of all, I thought it'd be good to, if we're saying employer content marketing, and let's talk about a definition. And let's then talk about the challenges that both Connor and Rowan are facing in their organizations. And then we'll get down to the dirt really in terms of, let's talk about the journey that they've been on and also some practical examples. And then we'll finish off with some advice so you can take some 6 key considerations to help turn your efforts more towards content marketing. And then we'll finish off with the Q&A. So first of all, let's define employer content marketing. So I think it really starts with mindset. Now, I think all too often brands are assuming that an audience are there ready and waiting to be served content and be sold to. And I think that really hasn't been the case. We can go as far back as when TVs did not have remote controls. And as the decades have gone by, and particularly with last decade, and continuing into this decade is that we cannot say we have an audience. I think we can't find an audience. So an audience isn't really found, it's created, because we need to come up with content that's going to earn their attention, and really help generate that interest to then convert them into sales leads, or in our case, into the right candidate and employees that will be generating value to the business. So when we're talking about a definition, so this is really kind of my take on it. It is actually strategic content that earns and maintains the attention of your ideal hires. I think that earning and maintaining attention is really important, because you're not just competing against your competitors, you're competing against life. There's so much going on in people's lives, especially on social media, where there's lots of competition for attention. You need to create content that can earn that attention and maintain that. So you build that audience by actually creating stories, creating opinion, and offering advice. And your employees have a whole vast range of opinion, expertise, and stories that can really help you. And then once you've got that audience and you've earned that attention and you've maintained it, then what you do is you then move towards the converting people through those sales messages. And I could argue that actually a lot of employer marketing, employer branding content out there is more focused towards bottom of the funnel activity, that conversion, selling the organization, selling the job. And there's so much more content that can actually be created. So let's talk about challenges. So Signet and Not Going to Uni, they are very different organizations, so I thought it'd be good to get a bit of a mix there, but they're on different stages of their journey as well. So I'd like to start with Rowan. If you could just tell us a bit about the challenges that Signet face.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I think the challenges at Signet are, it's not just about recruitment. When it comes to employer brand and content marketing, the first real challenge is getting that internal buy-in. So one of the first ever meetings that I had when I got my job was a budget meeting, and I was talking lots about EVP, which was a phrase that nobody had ever heard of before. And so basically, I was trying to get money for it. I had to go away after everybody laughed at me and come back with different terminology. So the first thing that I came up against was actually the language that I use when, I ended up talking about the what's in it for the candidate comms, which went down a little bit better. So getting internal buy-in has been a challenge. And, my background is working for advertising agencies and trying to sell in, employer brand campaigns, that EVPs, that kind of thing. I now, being on this side, know why that's so difficult, because you're asking people generally to do something new that's different, create a new budget line, and to talk other people who are probably a bit more traditional into doing something different. So that was the first key thing. The second part of it is, I've got huge recruitment targets, and part of this is recruiting mental health nurses, for example, or doctors or psychologists, all of which are on the NHS top 10 skill shortage areas. So actually, advertising on job boards and things like that, although it's all part of a mix, it's never going to get you the results you need and never going to get you ahead of the competition. So I think, we've tried to find different ways to engage. And like you said, Chris, it's not just engage an audience that's out there. It's actually, it's been a bit of a learning curve, but to build our own audience, because there's a huge difference between sending content that you think is right to, say a mental health nurse who's just finished a shift and is flicking through Facebook posts, hoping that they engage and like something, and then thinking in your wildest dreams that's going to be an application. It's not. So actually having a strategy behind what you do, creating your own audience and inviting them to kind of consume more very convenient and relevant content is hugely important. And I suppose the last thing I'd say, just in terms of challenges really for us, is making it work. What I mean by that is I've worked with a number of kind of external agencies, if you like, since taking this role, where it's all been about lead generation, and a lot of challenge to me and my internal team is, how do you convert these leads into applications, when actually I think if you really look at the metrics that is available, it's more interesting about how, are people engaging with the content and what's their journey after that? And, for example, one key metric for us is what happens on our career site, the amount of traffic that comes through, and, creating social media campaigns that have been really targeted with good research-based content with real people has led to a spike in applications through the career site. But it's been a long learning curve with trial and error. So riddled with challenges, to be honest, Chris.
And you touched on some of it already, but I think it's particularly interesting how, whether you're looking for qualified talent that is hard to come by, so nurses, for example, or unqualified people who could work in any role on paper, is that actually if they're not the right person, the implications for a company like Signet are large, aren't they? So actually to get the right talent isn't just a buzzword, a buzz phrase, is absolutely critical, rather than you could argue that maybe you're looking at maybe other companies where, maybe they don't generate as much revenue for their, for their clients as before. But when it comes to mental health care, it's pretty crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, the people we get in genuinely have the opportunity to change people's lives. We all do. Everybody works at Signet has got the same ultimate aim. And I suppose that what you just said has two prongs, because one is, we've got to get the right person. That's so important. But the right people sometimes don't know that there's a career in care for them. So you have to deliver the right kind of content from like-minded people that they look at and go, oh, that could be me. I could do that. They might have been at home caring for a parent or a sibling with mental health needs, never thinking that there's a career in it for them. So it is so important to hit people at the right time with the right message, in order for us to kind of get out of where most companies sit in, which is, preying on as many job boards for as cheap as possible, hoping, fingers crossed, that you're going to get applications. I think we've got to work so much harder now in the current climate to get ahead.
And we've talked about it before, where actually you can argue that actually you're putting off the challenge if you're not recruiting the right people in the first place, because the cost only comes probably even tenfold later on when that person doesn't stay. And you've got to go out again and hire again, where you have someone who's unhappy in what they do and end up not delivering that service that the organization needs.
Yeah, and it feeds back into exactly the first challenge, which I said, which is the internal challenge, because in my job, most of my time is trying to build relationships with the internal client managers, which in our case is or hiring managers, which is the hospital managers and directors and care home managers, etc. And if we are sending the wrong people, it increases their turnover, increases their cost and their risk. It does have massive ramifications. So getting the right people first time is an absolute priority for us, definitely.
Yeah, real cheers, Roy. And Connor, let's get you on screen, and good to hear about some of your challenges. I think, and Connor, if he joins us, he can continue and probably do a far better job than I. But here he is, Connor.
Sorry about that, Royal Air Force.
That's all right, no worries.
Royal Air Force Wi-Fi is the long and short of that. No, so there's a lot of similarities between actually a lot of what Rose said about Signet and with not going to uni. When I came into the company, the business was very stagnant, hadn't really done much for a number of years. Not going to uni back in the day built its name on a lot of physical legwork in schools and colleges across the country and a lot of man hours, which was great and built our presence, and we do still piggyback on that historic presence for sure. However, it was time for a bit of a shake up, to be quite honest with you, and it was a time to really reignite the not going to uni brand in this market. And one of the ways to do that was through content first, and goes back to Chris's point at the start about informing first as well with our target market. One of the first problems I had was going to my board and saying, as a new director, and going, I'm going to be starting to spend money on this thing called content, when we never had that line item in our budget, and that's never sat in our P&L. And in fact, our marketing budget was never even really that tailored around, not just content, but paid and a lot of these other things. So that was certainly a big challenge that I had to face. Our market has become more competitive than it was 15 years ago when we started. Yes, we're the longest serving commercial brand, but there are new brands in this market. There's brands that have gone on to raise Series A investment, which is a hell of a lot of money, but they can then invest in really fast growth and really fast marketing strategies and everything else. So with that competitive market comes the need for us to make a lot of noise. And again, that's where content marketing played really well. And we'll go on to how we did that as our first piece with our B2B for RecFest. And then outside of that as well, our audience have become a lot more driven on social media and YouTube since when we first started. So we also knew that we need to put out content that supported our audience, not just from a B2B drive sales, but actually to support our B2C, our student audience with application information, job search information, with interview prep and everything else. And that was a really big positive, not just to grow our audience from a B2C, but actually to support them and really fly their flag when they're going through those journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we think about what media companies do, there's a lot of people watching this will, have been contacted by media companies, and I think there really is a need to swap it up a bit in terms of not just thinking about obviously what products we can sell you, but not going to uni is a great example, because not going to uni says what it does. It's about people who decide that going to university is not an option for them. So that in itself is a very kind of meaty topic to create content that's going to help the people that you want to become your customers. But then also you apply that approach to helping your clients recruit the right early careers talent. So, okay, good stuff. So let's go on to the next stage. Let me just get my slides right. So let's talk about some practical examples, and let's go straight back to Rowan and Signet Healthcare. Rowan, you've touched on some of this already, but let's chat about the journey that you've had. You're a few years into your new employer brand journey, aren't you? And kind of content marketing has been the kind of the last 12 to 15 months of that.
Yeah, so I suppose my journey kind of comes before I actually joined Signet. So Signet was a client of mine when I was in ad agency world, and we actually had the opportunity to create their EVP and do a lot of the research behind it, which was a real kind of eye-opener. So when I got this job, I came with a massive belief in employer brand and in EVP, flying the flag for everybody who's watching this today. So what I walked into was creating something new for Signet, which was basically a new set of messaging, which was all research-based, all supported our EVP. So I could tell everybody, hand on heart, we were putting out the right messages to the right audience. And we would try very hard to use the right platforms at the right times, which was good. And you know what? Like year one, we hit our number. We got our number of starters that I was asked to get. And then into year two, we started bringing it to life. So in doing that, we started creating video content, which was a brand new thing to Signet. And we did this in a really kind of engaging way. So we held various discovery sessions, so workshops with current staff, where literally I would kind of rock up and start a discussion and have all these people who work together in busy environments every day, learning more and more about their individual journeys, where they came from, what their first job was, how they ended up getting their job, why they chose care, etc. And they would sit at the end of the session and turn to each other and go, "Wow, I didn't know that about you." And so really, really engaging was the first thing. And the second thing is I would then drive away from there with whoever else was there supporting me, thinking, right, we've got some really good stories to follow up on. So we created the video content, and it was good, it was on point. But really, it wasn't until kind of year three, which was last year, and actually starting to work with you, Chris, where we started thinking, well, what are we actually going to do with it? And I suppose it ticks one bit of the advice part later on is actually, it's all good and well creating video content, but unless you've got a plan with what to do with it, it's almost pointless. So one of the first things that we did, as you'll remember well, is we absolutely recycled, and we came up with so many assets from the videos we already took, and started putting them out and A/B testing them, seeing which ones work well, and really brought to life what we were doing, which is fantastic. And that's where we started seeing some real results. And I suppose this year, which is year 4, what we've started doing is actually looking at the individual sites themselves, individual departments like psychology or doctors, and then the individual service lines. So we have different service lines in Signet, where we look after people with different illnesses, and it takes a different kind of person to come and work in those services. So we started creating content that's very specific, and lots of it, not big ticket glitzy videos where you hang all your hats on it and you have to use that one. We've created lots, and especially through the pandemic, Chris, the Zoom videos that we would take, and then very quick edits, very quick turnarounds, handing them to people who are the hiring managers and saying, there you go, we've got your content, go share it. And actually, because it's real and they were involved, they're more than happy to share it. Whereas if you give them something that's off the shelf, if you like, and you're saying, this is great, this is on point, share it, that they don't. It's just the way it goes.
No connection, is there? There's no
absolutely no. And then you just start seeing things build. Then we've got examples which I think you're going to show now of
absolutely
ways we try to engage people.
Before that, it's interesting you talk about when we first started working together. So it was March 2020, and you had just only 2 months before that produced a lot of video. So it could have been that I would say, okay, well, you need to produce more video, but actually what I wanted to do is make sure that, okay, let's take those videos and let's just serialize it, because there was absolute gold in those videos, and there's no guarantee that we're expecting people to watch all of those videos to find that gold. So that's where I think we got some quick gains. We were piloting this approach, which then teed us up very nicely to everything else that kind of followed to that for the rest of 2020 and into 2021. I think a good example of what we've done. So they call it the talent pool content series, which is the work we've basically been doing in terms of production and planning for the last 12, 15 months. And I think a thing that particularly stands out, and I think ticks the box when we look at the definition of employer content marketing, is the podcast that we created. We created that podcast specifically for nurses, given the challenges that Rowan and Signet are facing, hiring the right nurses, but also just generally the sector faces in hiring nurses. So we'll just play that video, a little bit of a snippet of the episodes.
If you're waiting for a time and space where you feel ready, you'll never be ready for anything.
No.
Ever.
No, the perfect time doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
The perfect shift doesn't exist. The perfect nurse doesn't
What's that
exist.
resilience, isn't it, as well? Like you say, the perfect shift doesn't exist. It's coming home, dusting yourself off and getting up next morning to go to handover.
Brill. Thanks for that, guys. And so I think in particular, the podcast, I think for me, it sums up content marketing, employer content marketing, because I briefed everyone in the strategy phase, and also the briefing of guests and hosts was, we don't sell Signet. There's plenty of there are ads out there that are doing the job or going, come and join us. What we need to do is we need to understand that, as Rowan's touched on already, we need to understand that nurses are busy, overworked, and they then even if they wanted to look for a job, they may not have the time to do so. So let's think about content that actually becomes a bit of a career utility for them. There's actually helping them take a kind of next step in their career, whether it's in the same organization or for another organization. So that's why we had the Caring for Your Career episode, where we had nursing leaders talking amongst each other, talking about how they can, what advice they give others to help them take that next step in their career. And if it ends up working for Signet, then fantastic. But the priority was actually about going, if someone's listened to that and gone away thinking that's giving me what I need, then fantastic. So if we go on to just the next slide. So the nursing podcast was, let me just get it up on screen. So yeah, the nursing podcast, Why We Care, was just one part of this talent pool content series. So we've done season 1, and we're actually in the process of producing season 2. And in fact, actually during the summer, the podcast went down so well internally amongst employees and stakeholders that actually we've also created a podcast specifically for staff. And so we've been working very closely with the internal comms manager at Signet, and it's become a really great tool for her to go out and capture these stories to really celebrate what people are doing. And it's called Changing Lives, the Changing Lives podcast, because whether it's stories, opinion, or advice is all about ultimately changing people's lives. We also did a talk series as well. And that talk series covers off a whole load of things there. I'll start off with the first example, and then Rowan, you maybe will bring you into the others. So we were recruiting for doctors and consultants, and had run an ad in the British Medical Journal. Now, it just didn't feel right in the British Medical Journal just to have an ad that said, "Please apply for us." I mean, I'm simplifying it, but we didn't want something which is a very direct sales message. So we wanted to do it where, so right, there's topics being discussed in this magazine, in this journal. Let's actually have doctors and consultants talking about that, about key topics. So we did that, and from that we had around 10 to 13 pieces of content, which was turned into three seasons, three series. So that really helped us hone in on a particular, specialism. But Rowan, you mentioned about the particular sites, various hospitals. So we did talk series for them as well, didn't we?
We did. So I suppose the talk series was just brilliant. Again, it is in the pandemic where this kind of really grew, because we couldn't get out and film anybody. So a lot of it was done over Zoom. And for me personally, it was great to have a little bit of ammo. So when you're getting asked, what else is it that you can do? What else can we do to kind of make a difference and try and engage or recruit people from their point of view? So doing the talk series, like, I know what we can do. We can get you on a Zoom interview. It's going to be a bit of fun. It's very informal. And we just get them talking and outpour the USPs of the site, of the job role, what it's actually like to work there. And, it could be a 20-minute discussion with lots of umming and ahhing and the odd bit of swearing. You do a quick edit and, hey, presto, you've got a 1-minute video that actually very quickly can go on a landing page. And the beauty of this series is that, or this group of bits of content, is that you have a landing page, and so many times we've put in there the podcast as well on the landing page with one of the talk stories, and you're away. The other elements to it. So we work in an environment where it is very challenging, but with that challenge becomes a really meaningful job. To get that across in an online advert of text where you've got to put everything else about what you need to do and what's expected of you and what you will get is really, really difficult. And various internal stakeholders would say, "Oh, you can't put anything negative in an advert, and don't go too real. We don't want to turn anybody off." It's very difficult to manage that situation. Whereas with with content, you just got it there. I mean, we've got some amazing people who have come from different walks of life, who are support workers. They come into work, very challenging environment, but just in that piece of video, it comes across just how hard some days are, but you know what, how worth it is. And it gives you goosebumps. It makes you, it's emotional stuff. And it does drive response. It's incredible. Definitely.
And I found that, that also because of the kind of easy setup of a Zoom call, and the production levels are always never going to be quite as good as a video shoot. But when you don't have that light camera action element to it, people do actually relax, and it's just a conversation. And really, your employees know so much and have had so many experiences that actually when you just let them go, they I think maybe sometimes they surprise themselves about how much they do know, because they start off being quite nervous, and actually by the end of it they're just like, yeah, we've got absolutely lots of content that we can dip into.
Yeah, I think for me it's like one of the biggest the biggest pulls for me around content-led approach is how real it is. So you know, if you look at two adverts, and one's got stock images of models, and one's got real people in real life situations, you can tell the difference. And there is no difference with that and video. So we did one, as you'll remember, with a virtual tour of a service, because we were having an issue where we'd get candidates who'd sail through virtual interviews in, you know, pandemic times. They'd turn up and have to give in their phone, go through an airlock, high security in some of our hospitals, and they would leave, you know, within 2 weeks. This isn't for me. The virtual tour of, you know, the guy works on reception saying, hello, this is my hospital, follow me. And he'd take you through the airlock, take you through the giving in your keys and your phone, just brought it all to life and made it so real and makes a difference. So, you know, whilst there is lots of value in the quick fix with Zoom, that actual particular one I was just talking about there, and having you know, a professional shoot, walking through a mental health hospital, it's just spot on. You can't beat it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us back to the slides. If we just go back to that team in the background. We also did, we've done those film shoots, Stevenage touring included, but we went up to the northwest of England, in Manchester, to help recruit support workers. So that's the life stories category that you would have seen on screen, and you'll hopefully see in a second. Those life stories are in particular, like those people have those life skills. You know, they've worked in different jobs, industries before, and didn't realise actually that they would have the skills to become great support workers. So we took that kind of natural conversation approach and applied it to a film shoot where we had interviews with support workers where they were very much, you know, being very honest about the experiences they've had. And Pete, who's the big guy with a beard and the tattoos, is saying, to be honest, you know, I've got to say it. And he pauses and says, I have been attacked, you know, and then just goes into the thing about that's connected with that. So it turns it into a positive story. So that's the life stories piece. And then we've also got the kind of the final piece, the content-led approach, which is basically the Learn series. And that's the health career guide, isn't it, Rowan? You tell us a little bit about that.
It is. So, you know, this was an idea that we came up with, which was to create a sub-brand. So with every mental health hospital in the UK, there are sometimes negative connotations. There, you know, it's social care and mental health care is a sector that people's perceptions are changing for the better, but it's very challenging. And so what we wanted to do is kind of take the brand element away from specific organizations and actually have a platform where, you know, as whether you're in care or already and interested, or you have no idea of care, that you could come to somewhere and actually learn about it. You can get real life stories, you can get advice, which was, you know, down to how you do your CV, how to prepare for an interview. And this was from people who interview people in Signet, and they were talking very honestly about, you know, this is what I think when someone turns up and they're like this, or when they get a CV that looks like that. We had experts by experience, so people who've come out of our services and now work with Signet. And then we had, external opinion as well. So people from outside of Signet who came in and added value in a different way. This was something that we did live, like we are doing now. It was also available kind of on demand as an after. As everything that we do with Chris, it became a series, and we've got the next version coming soon, which is the Social Care Career Guide. But the beauty of it, for me in my role, was seeing people who came in, they registered to come and join a session. You can actually see their journey through from that platform into our talent pool, and through the kind of the content that we've served them in the talent pool and the nurturing emails. You've actually seen them appear in the ATS as actual applications, and then you hire them and you think, you know what, all this is worth it because it just works. It just does work, which is just fantastic, and a real message that I would like to get across to anyone who's umming and ahhing whether this is a method worth doing. And, you know, it absolutely is, really is. It's an integral part.
Ronan, back. Can you hear me? Connectivity, I think. Sorry. Sorry, I must admit I probably missed a minute or so of what you were saying. So
it was all very
okay.
interesting. I promise you that.
Yeah, no doubt, absolutely guaranteed. And then just on top of all that content, then Rowan's got recruiters who screen hundreds of thousands of CVs every year. So we then produce content that was advice from those recruiters. And then of course, last but not least, was actually then the more direct marketing messaging, which is around job ads, open days for people who are actually actively looking for jobs, and of course job fairs. So let's go on to Connor. Oh, sorry. But just before we finish that, the all important stats is if we can just share my slides, please, team, in the background. Should be on screen. Okay. Well, actually, let's talk about it anyway. I think so. Ultimately, we produced over 200 pieces of content over 12 months, video, audio, and also various different ads for our different audience groups. But we have very targeted reach. We've absolutely invested in paid amplification. I
think just in case that Chris has gone off for everybody, we did get quite a huge response to all the campaigns. The end result was
amplification there.
Was around 1,200 people in a talent pool, which, as you can see here, actually 1,300 people in the talent pool, which led to 53 completed applications in the ATS. Since doing this, has actually gone much higher than that. But what we've got on top of this, Chris, sorry, I've just jumped in because your connection went.
Go for it. Yeah, please do. Absolutely.
Again, going right back to what I said at the beginning, is we've got the internal backing now to go again and to grow this talent pool. Without results, it's very difficult to drive these kind of decisions. And as Chris mentioned, we've now got other people utilizing our same methods of podcasts, of videos elsewhere in the business for various different reasons, including online conferences and live shows. So what we've done has been perceived as being innovative, because it is. It's perceived as working, because it did. And we're going to sail into next year with a real good kind of backing. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, awesome. Brilliant. Cheers, Roy. And Connor, let's move on to what Not Going to Uni have been doing. We've already kind of spoken about the journey already. What we did was in the summertime was very much the first step, wasn't it, in a kind of content driven approach. So tell us a bit about the Generation COVID series.
Yeah, so we signed up for RecFest rather naively, to be quite frank with you. Obviously, RecFest hadn't been in its normal guise because of the implications of COVID. So it wasn't the usual in-person event where you stand in front on the stage. A large portion of it was delivered virtually. One thing that I made crystal clear from the start was that we weren't just going to go on stage or virtually go on stage and go through our media deck and sort of pitch Not Going to Uni, because there's ample organisations doing that, and we don't want to be seen as that organisation. What we want to be seen as an organisation that informs our audience and gives our audience really actionable information. One of the big things at the time in the news every single day was Generation COVID was coming up, because it was at the time when we were waiting on A-level and GCSE results, and we were looking at the effects of COVID on the generations either taking exams or just a year or two before they were taking exams, or at university. So it was a really topical debate, and we worked really closely with Chris on coming together with a end-to-end talk about Generation COVID, and actually hearing authentic stories. So similar to like Rowan and the team at Signet did with Chris, have authentic stories of young people that found their careers during COVID, some of which were onto apprenticeships, and also from a young lad who was actually just finishing school at that time and going on to university. As well as a number of employers who we brought in to get involved, including Atkins, AstraZeneca and Co-op, who all had very different stories about COVID. You can imagine the AstraZeneca story. No one knew about us, now everyone knows about us. Co-op were talking about the joys of trying to sell funeral care during COVID. And Atkins talking about a lot of the engineering roles they were trying to sell. And
we got to hear, it was great to be able to hear from from kind of Generation COVID as well, because of your links with obviously school and college leavers and apprentices. We managed to get access to them, and so that's really valuable. And going back to the thing about it not being a sales deck is, you don't want to go. It's rare you go to a conference and you're happy to be sold to, So that approach I think is really important. And what we've done is we've just got a little clip of that video on the next slide. So the guys can just upload that. That would be excellent.
Hi everybody and welcome to the Not Going to Uni student panel here at RecFest this afternoon. It is lovely to be here and to be presenting on behalf of Not Going to Uni.
So yeah, that was a 60-minute conversation, 6 minutes of conversation total, and we cut it down to, I think it was 28 minutes for the actual for RecFest. But we're actually in the process now of actually producing 3 episodes of that content, so we were making the most of the content that didn't make the cut for the RecFest. But so that's going to be rolling out over the next few weeks. But Connor, you want to just talk about the just kind of the stats that have just come from even just the beginning of your journey?
Yeah. So obviously you can see the stats, and they're 100% incredible. I mean, just looking at the bottom one, which is the one that this all leads to, the cost per lead. We've done throughout COVID, when I joined in January, we did a number of different events, many of which were the typical virtual stand, which I'm sure you've all been to, where you upload your decks and things like that. And this absolutely trumps that in terms of cost per lead, the leads generated, and the quality of those leads, which was fantastic. So this has shaped our B2B strategy going forward. Our B2B strategy is a lot of content, because we know that it works now, and we know that employers and training providers in colleges and everyone else are crying out for content like this. They want to hear a different voice, and they want to hear unique, interesting information that supports them and helps them. The conversation Generation COVID helped organisations guide their strategy for coming out of COVID and engaging with young people. The biggest part and rollout from this as well is our B2C strategy and actually our offering for clients. We're now delivering a lot of client content as well. I'm currently sat in the common room at RAF Bryce Norton, and we've just been today and yesterday filming on the airfield at Bryce Norton next to a number of aircraft, showcasing apprenticeships on offer here. So that shows you how this, this one thing we did at the start of the year has completely changed, not just our B2B strategy, but our B2C strategy, and then our client strategy as well. So it's had a huge domino effect, and everything from the way our salespeople sell now to the way we engage with our ambassador community has changed.
Yeah, it's and looking forward to doing more for sure. So let's finish off with, only got a few more minutes left, so you want to allow some time for questions, but let's talk about some kind of practical advice, some 6 steps that are going to, we use and you can implement for yours. So stakeholder buy-in, first of all. Rowan, I think you got something you touched on already, but got something particularly you can share in terms of stakeholder buy-in.
Yeah, so I think what I mentioned at the start, so when I came into Signet talking about EVP, the phrase got banned quite quickly because I was confusing people. So like you put on this slide here, is avoid the buzzwords that kind of people hear all the time, and keep the communication that you have as real as the content that you're going to produce. And I think people just appreciate that and find it much easier to buy in. The other thing is do it bit by bit. I think if you try, my nature is to do it all at once, all the time, every time. But when you're doing something that's new, pick one site, for Signet, or one location at another company, or one product, whatever it is, and then do a pilot, just see how it goes, and then let the data drive the next decision.
Definitely, yeah. I think when it comes to audience, of course, lots of people say think about the audience, but I think if you go back to the mindset and definition slide that we talked through, is that absolutely you don't, like we did with the podcast, this is not about it's not about selling us as an organization and our job opportunities. What can we do to actually help people? What can we do to give them something that actually becomes a utility for them to help them take that next step or that first step in their career? And also, I mean, I've seen over the years plenty of research, projects where there's lots of conversations with employees, and that ultimately filters into the development of the banned EVP phrase, but actually there's a lot of content there that should not only be filtered into the research, should be absolutely used in your marketing as well. So actually, and Rowan's done this as part of Discovery. We also created it in those kind of Discovery and content days to help get that content. And we're doing some really interesting things over the next few months around that as well.
The beauty of this as well, Chris, is that if you go to say like a brand agency, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here to anyone watching, but if you ask for I want to renew our EVP this year, then that's big ticket. That is, I used to sell them myself, and it's cost a lot of money, a lot of work. When you do the discovery days or content days, you actually, if you canny with it, you revalidate your EVP and the promises that support your EVP with every single session. And you just document that, and that is all the research you're ever going to need again. It's unbelievable, proper eye opener. Back to you.
Absolutely. And I think, and then we could talk. We'll have to do another episode on this, I think, for the podcast, that's for sure. To go into more detail around this. But the next thing around content production, I think, goes back to what we talked about earlier on about making the most of assets you're creating. So, actually use a Zoom calls for things that may typically be in talking heads that require a lot of movement of people, into locations, and save the higher end production stuff for more documentary style video. But once you've created that content, absolutely make sure you break it down from macro content into micro content, because a blog post could easily be 3, 4, 5, 10 pieces of content. So make the most of that asset as much as possible. And then in terms of promotion, Rowan's already mentioned some of this already, but by involving employees in actually, obviously, the creation of that content, and especially we found by doing things like the remote recordings through the Zoom style calls, is you don't just use them as influencers and you will free reach. You're using them as content creators, and when they're involved in it and they're like properly bought into it, then there is absolutely more chance they share that content. But don't just rely on that free reach. Absolutely make sure when you're doing your production budget for a piece of content or a content program, you've got to make sure that, say, 30% of that budget is allocated towards promotion, even if it means doing less content but maybe focusing more on quality. And then that serialization I'm talking about, and make sure you do have that there, because even if you do get that free reach, you're not guaranteed that the right people see that. And we all know now, especially with social media, with programmatic, you can reach the right people, absolutely. But reaching them is, just because you can reach them doesn't mean you reach them with anything. So actually take that employer content marketing mindset, be like a media company yourself, and think about the content you need to create to then actually build your own audience. So you don't have to pay for that reach every single time, and actually then think about, well, okay, but are there enough talent pools out there that do job vacancies only? Yes, there absolutely are, definitely. So think about what content that's been created there can then be filtered into the talent pool lead nurturing comms, because actually just because you've got their contact details is just really a very early stage in the process. You've got that competition in your message feed and also your inbox as well. That means that you've really got to compete for that attention even after someone's signed up. And then, as we've touched on already, is like content marketing is absolutely long term. So that thing about piloting, test it, scale it, and scale it, get stakeholders really into the success of it and taking part in it, and then you'll be bit by bit increasing the share of your marketing budget towards the approach that we are talking about. So we'll finish off with any questions, but before that, if anyone wants to follow on the conversation after that, because I know we're short on time, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. And of course, pop over to your podcast player of preference and listen to the Employer Content Marketing Pod. We've got plenty of episodes there that are representing the kind of things we've been talking about today.